Hey guys, I'm officially done with my 21 days of prayer and fasting. Yay! When you're watching this is obviously much later than when it was actually my 21 days were up, but I wanted to give a recap as to what I've learned, how I've grown, what my relationship with God is like now coming out of my 21 days of prayer and fasting. So to start off, I will say this fast was a lot more challenging than I thought it was going to be for different reasons than what I thought they were going to be. I talked about this in my other video, but going into this fast, I already had a preconceived idea as to what I thought it was going to be because I had done the fast last year. And so I was like, I already know what I'm getting myself into. I know how it's going to go. It's going to go like X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and it's going to be like that. And then it was nothing like that. It was nothing like that, which is on me because I shouldn't have gone into it thinking that I already knew how things were going to go because you know how God is. When you think you know, God is going to be like, no, you don't know. God will humble you. And he humbled me because I did not know. It was completely different from last year, completely different. One of the main things that God showed me throughout the fast was that denial of flesh is not just about the food. Obviously, fasting is about denying your flesh and denying yourself food and certain foods during a certain amount of time. For me in particular, a certain amount of time. When you are craving food or when you're desiring food or when you feel hungry, taking the time to turn to God and put that focus into worshiping Him, talking to Him, communicating with Him when you are hungry and tempted to eat and things like that. That's the point. That's the main point of the fast. But I had gotten to a space where I was pretty comfortable with that. I was just comfortable with not eating, where it was like, not necessarily that it was easy to not eat, but I wasn't at a state where I was like down bad ever. I ever felt like I was starving or like, oh my goodness, like I can't do it in a way that made craving food tempting to me. Like I was very comfortable with not being tempted into eating. And that was when God had to show me that, like, hey, I get that food may not be your temptation, but during this fast, it's not just the food. Like, it's obviously the fast is the food, but if you are feeding your flesh and not denying your flesh in other areas of your life, then the fast is null and void. The fast is null and void if you're not actually denying your flesh, because the point is to deny your flesh, period. The food, other things, any other sins, any other, not even necessarily sins, but like any other things where you're like really pouring into self and feeding your flesh, like the point is to deny your flesh and to turn to me. And if you're comfortable with denying food, there are other areas in your life that you need to be denying your flesh. And if you're not doing that within the fast, then like I said, it's null and void. And not that God doesn't still see what you're doing in your fast and being like, oh, you denied your flesh from the food, but you didn't deny your flesh in this. Oh well, like the fast doesn't count. Like no, like God still recognizes my pursuit of Him and recognizes, my intentionality in fasting. But He was also making me aware that there are other areas that we can be working on since you feel comfortable, you feel pretty good in this area of food. The second main thing that I learned, and I talk about this as well in my other video, or I touch on it a little bit in my other video, is that I need to be an equal participant in my blessings. I need to be an equal active participant in my miracles. And what this really showed me is that I was calling my laziness faith. And when you are calling your laziness faith, you'll get in this crux where everything is like super spiritual and you're like, oh, I'm just living for God. And you make excuses for yourself and cast blame on God where things shouldn't be. So when certain things don't work out or when certain things don't happen the way that you want them to happen, you're not even discouraged by it. You're more so just like, oh, well, it's not God's timing. Oh well, if it was meant to be, then God would have made it happen, which is true. All of these things are well and true, but they're not always true in your specific context. Like these are true statements in general, but for your particular context, that may not be the case. You may have not gotten that job because you did not put in the work to get that job. Like you did not study up on the company. You did not prepare well for your interviews. Like you did not put in the work and the effort to get the blessing that you were praying to God for. And you may have missed out on a great opportunity that God opened the door for you and you easily could have walked in it with Him, but you were lazy and you didn't put the work in to actually get where you wanted to go. And that's what I was feeling God was telling me. There weren't any situations where I felt like I had missed out on a blessing or I had missed out on any moments, but there were definitely things where I was praying for in 2024 where I was realizing, like, hey, I could be so much further along in this thing. I could be so much further along in this area if I was actually putting in work towards it. One of my main goals, one of something that I'm really working towards has been a car, like a new car. And that was one of the main things that God was like really highlighting to me, where I was like, oh, I really need a financial miracle. Like, oh, I really need like finances. Oh, I really need to like, need help in doing this because a car is in need. However, I wanted to just wake up one day and a car just be like out in the driveway. Like that's that's what I wanted out of the situation. Like ultimately, like if I'm being so transparent, like I just want to wake up one day with a car out in the parking lot and like that is it is what it is. I didn't do anything. I didn't call anybody. I didn't make any choice. Like I didn't do it. And I'm not saying that God cannot do miraculous things and somebody blesses me with a car out of nowhere and I'm not saying that God cannot do that, and I'm not saying that God won't do that. I'm just saying that God was saying for me, Sierra, I have given you the means and the resources and the tools to do the work, to save, to budget, to make a plan in order for what you desire to come to pass in your life. And you're doing nothing. You're doing nothing to get there. So, yes, you will go another year praying that same prayer, and maybe this year you'll actually act on it and you'll actually get somewhere with it. Maybe, maybe. And so that was just like the main thing that God was really working on me about is that Sierra, you you are a faith girl down. Like you'll believe God for lots of things. You have big faith, and I do have very big faith for a lot of things. However, you use faith as a crutch. You use faith as a crutch sometimes because you don't want to work. You want God to just do it. But that is not that is not how God operates. The third main thing that I really, really learned from this fast was just the importance of my mental health. And I've always been one who's been really into mental health because I do battle with depression and anxiety, especially in my past. Like I've had deep issues that I worked through in therapy with depression and anxiety, and they still obviously work through now today. However, I did not recognize how intentional I needed to be with gatekeeping my mind. I was watching a sermon, I believe, and one of the sermons was talking about how the enemy attacks you and knowing how the enemy attacks you. Honestly, this may have been in the book that I was reading by Stephen Chandler. Hold on. Was it in this book? It may have been in this book. It may have been in this book. It may not have. I don't really remember. It was a lot of stuff. I've been doing a lot. I've been doing a lot of reading. I've been doing a lot of watching. So I'm getting where I got this information from Miss, like, it's getting lost in translation in my mind. It's either in the book or it's in one of the sermons that I watch. But it was talking about knowing how the enemy attacks you. And for me, when I was reflecting, I was like, the enemy attacks me most in my mind. And it's like the easiest way to attack me is in my mind because I'm a very logical thinker. If it doesn't make sense, then I don't get it. If it doesn't make sense, I don't get it. Like it just doesn't like it has to make sense in order for me to like move forward or anything. Like I need to understand. I need to fully understand and have like everything is up here for me. So it's makes sense that the quickest and easiest way for the enemy to attack me is here because everything operates up here for me. And that's how I move, that's how I navigate life is in my mind. And so it's not even in the sense where because like originally I was thinking, oh, God has me in my mind with like depression and anxiety and thoughts of not wanting to be here and not wanting to continue with like thoughts like on that end of the spectrum. But what the fast really showed me was that it can get to that end of the spectrum, but there are things that lead up to that. Like there are there are minor things that the enemy does to attack me on a daily basis that are what get you to that end extreme. of the spectrum. And so for me, a big thing that I was working on at the fast was learning how to daily be a gatekeeper of my mind and recognizing what are my thoughts, what are not my thoughts, what are positive thoughts, what are not positive thoughts. Who did this thought come from? Where is it coming from? Is it the Holy Spirit? Is it the enemy? Is it the show that I was watching? Like, where are these thoughts coming from? And being a gatekeeper of my mind as to into like funneling out which thoughts are mine, which thoughts I need to keep, which ones I discard, and how to properly discard of certain thoughts. Because there were times where I knew that these were not my thoughts. I knew these were not positive thoughts. I knew these were things that, were not from God, but I didn't even know how to discard them. Like, I was just like, okay, I just won't think about it, or I just won't, but they would just keep coming back. They would just keep coming back. They were persistent. And so I was getting frustrated because I'm like, okay, I know that these aren't my thoughts. I know that these are not from God. I know these are things that I should not be believing and I should not buy into. However, what do I do with it? Like, how do I properly go about navigating these thoughts when I'm supposed to be the gatekeeper of my mind? And it was about replacing my thoughts with a new thought. Like, I need a new thing to believe. Like, if I'm not believing this, then what does the word say in contrast to this thought that I can believe and I can remind myself that cancels out this thought altogether? And so it was things like that God was really working on, because it wasn't the major things, depression, anxiety, that were the mental hurdles for me. It was the smaller things. It was the sprinkle of confusion, like the sprinkle of distraction, like finding little minor inconveniences. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Minor inconveniences are the biggest thing that will attack me. Like, minor, it's never like the major things. I was like, the minor inconveniences are always the things that get me. And so learning how to like be alert to the enemy's tactics for me personally, that was something that God was really intentional about us working through. And I am still working through those things. Just because the 21 days are over does not mean that I'm done with this. The beginning is like, we're just getting started. Like, I am definitely carrying everything that I've learned thus far throughout the fast into the rest of 2025. And I do believe that I am going to do another fast in June, just for like the 6 month period, halfway of the year, so that I can like restart, refresh, and carry out the last 6 months of the year in the same way that I'm starting out the first 6 months. I will say it is so interesting now, like being able to eat whenever I want to eat, because sometimes I still feel bad. Like, I still feel like I feel wrong. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm eating. Like, this feels so weird. Like, I don't know. It's so funny. But I thoroughly enjoyed the fast. If you feel that God is leading you to fast, I definitely think that it's something that is helpful, beneficial, especially in your relationship with Christ, in your walk with Christ. For me, I did it because I really wanted to start my year off with Christ, and I really wanted to be intentional about how I navigate my life and my relationship with God throughout 2025. And so if you feel so led, absolutely do it. I think it is beneficial. I think it'll be healthy for you as a person and you and your relationship with God. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any other questions about my fast or want any other details about my fast that I didn't go into in this video, please let me know down in the comments. I will respond to all of them, absolutely, and get back to you about anything that it is that you want to know in regards to it. I cannot wait to see you guys in my next video. Toodles.